All right. So, um, greetings. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you're well. To all of the watching eyes and ears, those who are watching now, those who will watch later. My name is Yao Togobo. Also known as Tugs. I'm the programs manager for the C Center of Young Black Professionals. So, for those who are just hearing me for the first time, just to give you a quick summary of what we do. So, a season of Young Black Professionals. We are a charity that is based in Toronto, and what we do is that we work with Black youth aged 19 and 29 who may be considered furthest from the labor market, and we really work to plug them into areas where we know that where there are opportunities. Where there are labor gaps in the Canadian economy. So we focus on film. We focus on digital technology, hospitality, social services, and the trades. And we work with Black youth. We assist them with the soft skills, and then we literally segue them into opportunities where we know there are labor gaps in the Canadian economy. Just to let you know, our next program is CTech. So which is a technology digital tech program, and it's going to be operating in a different way because of the quarantine, isolation, and COVID situation that we're in. Okay, well, you didn't come to hear me just waffle on, so I'm here. Well, the reason why we're here, we've got a series of conversations coming up this week, which is going to be focusing on anti-Black racism. And the worldwide focus of the anti-Black racism movement at the moment, spearheaded and characterized by Black Lives Matter, but a lot of groups around the world and the community itself and its allies are focused on this agenda. Tomorrow we have Anania, who was the leading force behind the anti-Black racism department in Toronto. Now she's the director of the community and finance, among other things. And on Saturday, we have our ED, who's going to be talking with the mayor of Toronto, and we'll go deeper into the whole avenue of anti-Black racism. But coming up, I have an old friend of mine, Shay Cage. She's a poet as well as a community activist. She's a director, an actress. She's got a plethora of work. She's award-winning, worked on both TV and on the stage, and she resides in Minneapolis. So when the incident with George Floyd went down a couple of weeks ago, and I heard it was in Minneapolis, my first thoughts went to my friend Shay. And since then till now, I've been really trying to get a hold of her. And I wasn't getting hold of her, and I wasn't even sure whether this conversation was going to happen. And the reason why I wasn't able to get hold of her is that, she's not only as a poet, she's a community activist. And as a result, she was really on the front lines of working within the community and dealing with the aftermath of the protest and much of the other social justice issues that are surrounding it. So finally, we managed to get hold of her and have a conversation for the first time in years this morning. And she said, "Yep, let's go ahead, let's do it today." And I know her spending time with us is taking some time from other work, but I'm hoping we more than make up for it. So this is the first time we're doing this type of activity in this type of way. So I'm going to invite Shay Cage to join me right now. I pressed the button and hopefully she gonna manifest.
Hey, voila.
Shay,
I see you. Can you hear me?
Excellent. I can hear you.
Fantastic. It's such.
I do hear you, but it does.
Yeah, I can hear you too. I'm very happy to be here. Yeah, I can see you and I can hear you, and it's a magical thing, technology. Sometimes we love it and sometimes we hate it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can see you, I can hear you. However, there is a a massive delay after you speak. And that's going to impede the way that we communicate. So I'm going to remove you and put you back, and hopefully that will resolve the problem.
Okay.
So technical mishaps. In fact, Shay, if you can hear me, I'm going to kick you off and then have you click the link to come back on. All right. So when you get kicked off, do not be afraid. Just click the link and get back on, and I'll put you back in. Okay. So hopefully we're going to do a take 2. I didn't want the feedback and the length of time it takes for someone to speak to get in the way of the conversation. But yeah. So for those that know that I did wear a spoken word and poetry hat, and this was one of the persons who we performed alongside way back in the day. Shay, are you there with us?
I am. Is there still a weird delay?
No, we are perfect. You are perfect. You are here. I am here. We are here. Thank you very much for joining us. So I mean, before we get into the backstory, what happened around Minneapolis, how is your town, your city at the moment, and what works is happening, is going on?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Actually, the city is in rebuild, and a lot of the city was burned, a lot was devastated. And so physically, I think we are in a place of cleanup, physically and mentally. I think what's beautiful that's happening now is folks in the community are showing up. They're showing up in humongous numbers, and they're just ready to roll their sleeves up. So I think a lot of us are exhausted, like worn out, kind of exhausted, but physically, but our hearts are still there. And also like the fire is in us. So I think in some ways it's like, the fact that I'm waking up tired every day is not going to stop me. I'm still, we still got an agenda. We're still pushing. We've had these wins, but it's just the beginning of a long road. And I think the question is, who's willing to walk that path with us? So, yep, there's a bunch of structural things happening, and then there's folks that are fighting politically. So you ride down the streets, and you still see a lot of things boarded up, just tons and tons of plywood on top of businesses, but the muralists have come out, and they're just beautiful murals over the top of them. And then there's the buildings and just the actual like gutting of physical structures that, look like we're in another time, like a dystopian time zone.
Listen, when you're able to take pictures of the mural, please take pictures and tag us in when you take the pictures. So, I mean, let's go back a couple of weeks. So Minneapolis is not not to call shade in your city, but it's not like one of the great international cities that automatically come to people's mind when you think United States, like the Chicagos, New Yorks, the Californias, etc. So when we heard of the Minneapolis a couple of weeks ago with the death of George Floyd, and now it makes international news. Where were you when you first heard about the murder of George?
I was at home. I was watching the news. And, when we saw, actually, I think somebody texted me first, but again, at home, because we were still sort of under the quarantine, it hadn't sort of let up. And still, to be honest, a lot of us are at home. So, I think there were days before we saw the actual video. We knew about the video, and I just made an active choice that I didn't want to see it.
Yeah.
And then my kids were in the living room the next day, and because they were just playing it over and over and over again, which is incredibly traumatizing, actually. And I'm super mindful of what they see, because they're already sort of politicized. And so when they see, Trump, they see, anything political on TV, they're like, who's that? They see a new one, they're like, you know, and what do they stand for? So they knew that there was a video, and there was some intrigue to see what the video was and what the officer was doing. And I said, we're not going to watch that. So, but they put it up before I could even get from the kitchen to the living room. So it's very disturbing, and I was just really upset because I did not want my kids to see that. Yes, we've been at home pretty consistently. The kids have been mostly here, but then, you know, since the riot and et cetera, we've been in and out, in and out.
Wow. And how long did that take to heat up? So we saw the video and, you know, the protests, et cetera. And then everything started to get really hot. Like from on the ground, from your perspective, did you feel a sense and mood in the city? When did things start to, when you recognized there's a shift here?
To be honest, it was a matter of days. And I think that speaks to a lot. It speaks to, yeah, it's funny that you said, you know, it's true. We're sort of, you know, I think one of our nicknames is like the Minneapolis, you know, so we're small, you know, we're not big, but not small. But, you know, I think some people refer to Minneapolis as the place where Kofi Annan went to school. You know, he went to school at my alma mater, actually.
Okay.
And so it's a very intimate, you know, there's a part of the Twin Cities that has, you know, an international sort of, you know, there's folks that have come in and out. It's kind of a global mentality. And then there's, you know, there's the rural parts of town, and then there's, you know, the newcomers. But it was a matter of days. And it was as if, I don't know, it's just like, you know, when I grew up in Mississippi, my dad was, he was like a welder, and he would put like a iron in a fire, you know, and you just watch it as a kid. You're just fascinated by fire in general, but you have to, there's a patience to it. And so you put this iron in the fire and it just get hot. You see it just, you wait for a while and it's hot, but you can't see it. You know, you don't see the color distortion. And then by the time it's hot, it's almost like the tip can actually fall off. So it was sort of like somebody had, you know, the temperature was just being turned up, because I think for a moment we were in a pause, like, what the hell?
Yeah.
In 2020 and this is still happening. And sure, you know that, you know, there's so many, this is happening all across the nation, but to see it like that, right up close, right blocks away, I think there was just something so disturbing, and the reaction was so incredibly immediate. And thank God for the young people here that are just fierce, you know, like we will get into the streets. We will shut the highway down. We will not move. Cars can come through. We are not stopping until justice is delivered. So I love this city because I love that part of the city. That we have been politicized to understand our political power. Okay. Now, so there was a real urgency, and people, you know, people just kind of rose up. And obviously there were folks at the memorial site immediately, you know, and, you know, folks were painting, you know, murals at the memorial site and around the building. There were people coming and, you know, put flowers and et cetera. There was a microphone and, you know, messaging going out daily. And then there was constant protests and rallies. So yeah, that's a long answer to.
No, that gives perfect context. And for those who are watching, again, who are watching live, if you've got a question that you wish to ask, feel free to ask in a comment, because I will prioritize your questions over mine, because I can speak to Shay anytime. Was it such a massive shock? I mean, I know there's, wherever there are Black communities and there's a police force, there seems to be an element of tension, which is highlighted. So was there, or is there a racial tension with the police? And was the way that police acting a massive shock, or is this examples of how the police act? For example, whenever I see LAPD or NYPD, as bad as it be, I just expect them to be violent, disrespectful to Black communities. Is that the perception of in Minneapolis of the police department?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
I mean, we experienced this with, it's not like this is the first time that it's happened.
Yeah.
We had to deal with this in several other occurrences. I remember way back in high school, which was one of my first introductions to the extremity of police brutality and a young boy being shot in the back. And then we experienced Philando, Castile, and as a mother, as a member of the community, and understanding how it happened. And so we've been here before, Jamar Clark, there's a long list of others. David Smith, he was restrained, and I believe he was asthmatic, so there is a history of this type of behavior. And in addition to coming off of the heels of Ahmaud Arbery, I literally just sat on my front steps with my kids, and NPR News was doing a special of how many of us were running, for Ahmaud that day. Yeah. And so we literally sat on the steps and cried and said, and we had a talk and a prayer for him inside the house, and said, we're going to run. We're not going to be able to run, 2.3 miles, but we're going to run. Our neighbors are going to see us. We're going to run. We're going to, and we're going to lift up his name, and we're going to get on news and say, this is not okay. And so I think there's, the nation was open. I mean, the nation has been open, right? But I just think that in addition to this, and all that we're dealing with the pandemic and losing Black lives at, astronomical numbers, it was too much. It's too much. We're being, I wrote a piece, and it's, there's a line in it that says, that really speaks to like what it feels like, to have a target on your back, when it seems like the world's got it out for you and yours. And that's what it felt like.
So then if we fast forward, so there was the death, and then there was the outrage and the protests, right? And then after the protests, things started to spark off. Was the uprising, so-called riots, was that as a reflection of, in your opinion, was it a reflection of bad actors, or was that a reflection of just people's general anger with what happened?
In my opinion, I believe that it was a reflection of a community pulse that is saying we need a change, and it needs to happen not tomorrow, not next year, not years from now, but it needs to happen now. And so people were very specifically at the 3rd precinct, demanding for change, for defunding the police. There has to be a shift. So it wasn't. It's very. Sorry about that weird light. That's come. But it has, yeah. So people are very, I just really don't want to undervalue the intentionality of the movement. Very strategic and very specific. And at the same time, people are hurting. People have real emotions, and they're getting angry, and when you're not being listened to. And I think people are demanding that these officers, because what happens in history, we all know, right? That these kind of incidences happen, and then either they're given, maybe a leave, an absence with pay. And so folks immediately were saying something needs to be, they need to be let go. They need to be fired immediately. An investigation needs to start. So it was very specific and political in terms of community demands driven. And
when I heard about third degree murder, I was like, I didn't realize there was a 3rd degree murder. But the police managed to find that one. So there's a question that came in that asked, what do you say to folks who boil the whole movement down to the riots?
I say to people that say that we have to get smarter about our history. And I say that not like sitting on any kind of pedestal, because even though I've been sort of in the movement since I was young, there's still so much that we have to learn. And I just really believe what some of the young activists are advocating now for political education. It's huge, because when we lack a certain knowledge, then we come to the situation with a certain frame. And that is as if, it's like we live in this neighborhood and a fire broke out. And it's like, oh, I saw that kid throw the can. But there may be a long history that predicates what led up to that, right? The kid's been bullied. The neighbor's been calling cops on this kid, the only Black kid on the street. So what we have to really look at the whole and not one point. And so I think it also is, it devalues the wins that I think our activists and our community have achieved. When we just say, oh, it's just riots and people were just looting and they were just, breaking into Target and Cub Foods and et cetera. It's not that simplified. And the last thing I'll say is our power to be able to say enough is enough. It's like how some of us, when we were raised as kids, our parents raised us and they're like, I'm gonna raise you as a peaceful person, because we're, children of God. But if somebody keep hitting you at school, you got to defend yourself. So, in different parenting, people have different opinions about that. But I'm not going to get slapped up against the head constantly, without saying, stop slapping me. So I think so we really have to understand before we really chisel it down to sort of point the blame at, oh, they just, it was just as simple as a riot. And in fact, a riot is a powerful, powerful thing. Look at riot, look at the history of riots, look at the history of insurrections. They don't just happen overnight. There's a boil up. It's like that metaphor I said, there's that thing in the fire and it just gets hotter and hotter and hotter. So we have to be able to peel back those layers and go, oh yeah, okay, so this is a city with huge disparities, right? This is a city, when you look at the economic, mean average of families, Black people are making half than white folks. You look at the educational, gap, and we're like, I don't know what the numbers are now, but I know there was a point where we were like number 50 in the past 50 in the nation. And it makes no sense at all, because there are some incredible and beautiful things happening here. When you see the way that artists are working, when you see some of the things that have shifted, but these disparities, unemployment, it's huge. Yeah, so people are not, that's living, those things are living and existing in Black and brown bodies for years. So yeah, we got to be smarter than that, my community.
Okay. Someone said, don't devalue the Confederate flag. Its history shouldn't be distorted by Black injustice during that time. Okay. Yeah, not quite sure what that means. I think we should move on from that one, to be honest, unless you want to address that point. But
I can't address that kind of ignorance because and I know it's a conversation now, and there's a lot of people advocating for just the erasure of it and what it means and symbolizes. But I think that's somebody that really is on maybe a page one, and I can't. So there's a certain y'all got to get caught up. Y'all got to get caught up, and you can't spew that ignorance with us when you know that some symbols are really, detrimental. They carry blood and they carry so much painful history. So I can't address that one.
All right. Yeah, let's move on from that. What is it? Like, for example, when the issue happened with Rodney King and lots of the uprisings that happened thereafter, the nature of this seems different because it has unearthed a look into systematic racism. Why is that? Why has the death of George Floyd not just been seen as an example of racism from the perspective of violent police officers, but now there's a look into the reality of racism from its true definition: power plus prejudice and discrimination. Whereas beforehand, people just looked at it as a police brutality issue.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I think I think it's a shame sometimes because the media doesn't provide the space for us to have the nuanced conversations that we need. And I just really give props to C Center and you for holding, because I actually think this is where we need to be. I think we need to have more community conversations and sometimes invite the ignorant conversations in, and the people that aren't all on the same side. So it's like I feel like there's some nuances in the answer to that. But my immediate response is there, and I speak from my own frame and people around me. But I think that there is something incredibly brutal and disturbing about seeing that video at that present time, and how we and the longevity of him being not allowed to breathe. I mean, 8 minutes. And I'm not saying this hasn't happened. Similar things haven't happened. Yeah. But there's something there's clearly, right? And as history says it, there's something about the timing of everything. So I do think that the boil up and the simmering, but there is something that was so brutal, and I can't help but look through a lens as a mother now. I mean, almost everything I see in the world now is like, I was a mother of brown kids. I'm just like, I can't. And when he yelled out for his mom, I can't even, I don't even have words for it. So I think my response, I imagine, is very different from somebody else's. But I think as a nation, for us to see it up close like that for that long, and to see that white officer with his knee on his back as if he had a prized pig of some sort, that tells you that this is not an isolated situation. This is so deep into a system that it really is going to take dismantling the whole system and starting over. So when people say, "Oh, we can't even imagine a world without the police," then what are you really saying? You can't imagine a world without the type of violence? Because I can't even name on one hand the number of times that the police have come to my rescue. I know all the instances that I have had in my human life with the police have been those that have been traumatizing. So I really push others to really consider that, consider the privilege that they might carry, and realize, because there are a lot of neighbors, good-hearted people that are like, I just don't understand. We need the police, and the police are good. So really unpack that and look at their history.
Let's go there, because there's now the rise of the popularity of the defund the police, right? And to be honest, I hadn't heard of that movement before. A couple of weeks ago. So it's a real thing whereby people are saying we just do not need police force. So let's defund the police. So what is the aspiration of that movement? And in it being defunded, are we saying we just need to restrict the police, or are we saying we need to get rid of the police altogether and replace them with something different?
That's where I think the community conversation comes in place, right? Yeah. I think, I don't profess to be, a scholar in any way, but I do know I do carry my lived experience, and I do lift up the leaders that are around us. And I was listening to a broadcast today by the spokesman recorder and Stefanetta Harmon, who was facilitating that conversation, and Nakima Levy Armstrong and some other political leaders that were just blowing my mind with the simplicity of how it can happen. And so when you calling for defunding of the police, right, and looking at all of those millions that go into that structure, and what we can actually do on the opposite side of that. And then one of the brothers said, he said, there's a lot of things that we might not completely agree on yet, because this is the beginning. This is one of the first times that we've actually entertained this notion, like you just said, so we don't, I mean, what we can agree on is that we need a shift from the police, the system of policing as the way that we know it now. We cannot continue to move forward with that. So in any case, there needs to be a radical, I just really want to use that word, a radical shift. And I really support those that say it's not about reform, it's about dismantling. There's others that feel like it's a two-part process, and others that feel like it's about getting rid of parts of the system and really going back to the days when police, lived in the neighborhood. Mayor Melvin Carter, our first Black mayor in St. Paul, and a friend of mine, he was speaking passionately a week ago about his own father, who was a cop, and how they lived in the Rondo neighborhood, and everybody knew they knew his dad, and they loved his dad, and there would be instances where something would be going down, and the criminal would say, I'm not going anywhere until Mr. Carter comes, and he put on his outfit, his uniform, and he would go, because the people had a history. So there's a certain level of building trust, because they're not from outside. So, I mean, I think that we don't need to be hasty, and that's what's scary. I think I'm tired, but I also think I'm living with anxiety right now, because it's like, oh, we got to do it all. We got to come up with all the answers now. We got to be, we got to be super sharp, and we got to know exactly. We got all our, we got to know it's got to be defunded, and this amount has to go to this and that. I think this is the time that we actually need to sit down and again, roll our sleeves up and say, what are our options? As artists, we map it out. When my husband and I are creating a film, we put up the paper, and it's like, okay, what is the vision? So we know where we're going, right? It's like, that's the North Star. Okay, no matter what happens, the dogs come, keep looking for the North Star. You lose your way, you know where you're going. And then you know who the people are. Okay, these are the people that are with me. Okay, and these are the obstacles. So you have to really map it out. What are the resources? Otherwise, I think it's we're again put in a position where things are half made, half cocked. And then we also know what happens in these situations, that a lot of times, the systems and the powers that be try to pit us against each other. Yeah. So in my own spirit right now, I'm trying to lift some stuff up and know that I am not the only one. I'm only a fragment of some mighty folks around me. And then how can we also lift them up? And then the ones that know this, the ones that have really been doing their homework, and they have really committed to, the political education that is really essential right now, then come on, let's make a path for them. And then I might have a little piece that I can like whisper in somebody's ear. So I think that's a really valid question, but I don't think that we have to be so reactionary and have all of the answers. I'm for dismantling it. I think it's radical, and I think it's powerful, and it's like, why not, you guys? What would it look like to start from scratch? Okay. I mean, we know what safety feels and looks like, not just us in Minneapolis and St. Paul and, the Twin Cities, but every person around the world. You ask that question, what does safety feel like? What does protection feel like? What does love feel like? What does joy feel like? And we're going to have a word bubble that has a lot of the same things in it. Yes. So even if we started from there.
Well, listen, Lamar Mondisi Sanka has a point. I'm going to come to it in a second. But before I do, I just wanted to ask with regards to the protest, to jump on your point, is change only going to come as a result of the protests that are happening? And if so, how much energy and stamina do these protests really have to try and create change?
I mean,
I know that's a loaded question.
But the simple answer is yes. I mean, the simple answer is hell yes, because we've seen it before. So so change is going to come as a result of the protest. That's not the only change that's going to happen. So the answer to that is no, right? But do two things have to exist? Can two things exist for there to be major shifts? Absolutely. I think where we get a little off track is by saying, well, I'm not one that protests. I don't hit the streets. I'm more of a, I sit here and I do this and that. So then I say more power to us that can do that. I mean, we got a lot of people that are immune compromised right now, but they're strategic thinkers. It's like, then what can you do at home? Because I'll tell you, the ones of us that have been signing those petitions, the ones of us that have been making those phone calls, I guarantee you that those things have been shifting. So I just, so yes, and I guess I'm saying, there's multiple, even you don't have to be smart to answer that one. There's multiple things that need to happen for true change. And I think, again, systemic change. So there's some structural things and there's some immediate things that just need to just be happening right away. But we want long-term, we're thinking, I imagine that many of us are thinking, not just about our kids' generation, but the generation and the generation and the generation after that. So when you really think in that context, it's like, oh yeah, because, me just, doing this on some boards, that's not what is that kind of, but visual messaging is important because our hearts need to be restored. But where is the real systemic change happening? And what is the reminder that we're here? A lot of times Black people are put into positions around the world where we are made to feel invisible. And that is as strangling as somebody physically putting their hands around our neck, because we know what it feels like. We know what it feels like to be the other. We know what it feels like to be made to be invisible. And when you feel invisible, it's real easy, particularly in a place where there's like 6% to less than 20% of your people. So you don't see your people often as you would like, because there's not that many of you, right? But there's a collective mass of you that are powerful. So you're made to think, are we the only ones? Can we affect anything? And so the simple act of showing up every day and not turning back and saying, oh no, it's time for us to be quiet because we did our thing. And now, there's a duration on these protests and these rallies. It's not a joke. It's not a game. These people they're getting up and being out there because they know that their presence impacts change. When the mayor goes into his office and he's like, they're still here, they're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere until things shift. So I say yes, and.
Okay, so I've had a question here about a young lady by the name of Candace Owens. Apparently she made some detracting comments about George Floyd. So the question from Shaq Jar Radio is whether you heard the comments made by Candace Owens on George Floyd.
I did not.
No?
I'm sorry. A lot of us are also trying to practice radical self-care. And part of mine is figuring out how I want to be informed. We have to, right? But there's a certain point where I gotta turn off the news and the updates, because I think at this point, especially when things feel fragile. So I apologize, but I will write that down and I will get enlightened. But I probably am not the best one to address a question.
Okay. Well, I mean, if you know Candace Owens, when I was asked whether I'd watch Candace Owens, I said, you know what, I need to do a lot of self-care before I take that one, take her in. She's a Black person who doesn't align herself with black causes. So I'm pretty confident she wouldn't have said anything too in supportive of either George Floyd or the current climate that we find ourselves in. So I mean, I guess that speaks to the point, like how there may be a lot of people who are even Black who side against the movement of wanting to change the system, change defund the police, and change the reality, because they don't feel it's a it's a real reality that we're in. Do we focus on that? Do we ignore that and just keep on marching towards the freedom bell and then ignore the detractors, or do we try and convince and win the detractors over?
I mean, I think that that's nothing new to our history, particularly in this country. And I know that, you carry your history, of the country that you came from. But I feel like there's going to be a lot of things that are going to try to get us off course and distract us. So we have to figure out how to keep our eye on the prize. And each individual, and I think, so I speak for myself, each individual, I have to figure out where I am best, how can I best serve? And I encourage other people to really put it in that first person. What can, we had a big conversation in the community last weekend, and, the prompt was, what can I do? So I would encourage you to just write a list of all the things, what is it that you can do? And I think once we really focus in on that, then you can sort of figure out, it's like those kid connector things, okay, so then other folks around me also, okay, so we are the worker bees. We are the ones that are going to be in the streets, or these ones over here, they're the ones that are going to be on the front line in the streets. Oh, these are the ones that are going to be trying to shift policy. So I feel, I guess, I think we can easily be divided, and we can also be made to think that our fight is trivial, because I've seen that before. And so you have to align yourself also with folks that are like-minded and advanced and futuristic thinking. Because when you do that, a whole new world opens up. But when you're around folks that are limited in scope and mind, and I'm not putting blame on them, because I have people like that around me, in my family and friends, some of them, and I feel like a lot of us are, a lot of folks are coming to a higher understanding now, because the movement is shifting and it's demanding a certain level of knowledge. And I see people reading more, it's like, pick up some Octavia Butler. Think, when you really start to think like futuristically, then radical shifting doesn't seem so strange. You're not like, what? I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine a world where Black people are the president. You really think through it. Years ago, people couldn't even imagine that. And then it happened. So that's my answer falls on, how do we imagine the world that we really truly want, and be real and know that we have been socialized and brainwashed as a people, as a community, and not just us, other people too. And so there's limitation. We've been socialized to believe that, okay, there's a place for us. And we can't even imagine beyond that place. So we have to really unshackle ourselves and our brains in order to think outside of that. And once I feel like that starts to happen, then there's a shift in the things that you believe are possible. And then there's an agency in terms of, okay, now how do we build this? Okay, I can see it. I can see the thing. How do we build it? Okay, who's got the resources? So you move into a different plane.
So it sounds like you feel like, I guess, very inspired at the moment by is it specifically the Minneapolis activist community that you're inspired by, or is it the nationwide and worldwide impact of what happened?
Both for me.
Also, I'd love you to pay a little bit tribute to the Minneapolis, activist community, and give us an insight about what they are like, what your friends and fellow soldiers in the movement. What is that like?
I'm inspired by both all the time. I mean, Black Lives Matter just inspires me, period. I think, and the endurance of that movement that has really ushered in a lot of other, young activists. In my own city, there's a group called Black Visions Collective. It's mostly, younger artists and activists and queer artists that, that are shifting shifting, like really being super clear about, what the shifts and the change need to look like, and are unafraid. And so that inspires me. I love just being around younger people, period. And I think as I get older, I'm learning how to, when I don't need to speak anymore. I don't need to be the one that's doing the big old, the poet on the thing. I mean, and if I'm called for that, absolutely, but I don't need to always. And so I'm inspired by the Million Artist Movement, and just that concept. We were one of the founders, and now we just love and support and collaborate. But I think their radical vision of bringing community together, of showing up and centering art, and and even inviting people to like make quilts, and the knowledge of like quilt making and how that goes back to our ancestors historically, and making sure there's safety, etc. Unicorn Riot, Reclaim the Block, and people like community policing in a way that already is a model. So it's like, it's not abstract. These folks are figuring out how to, because they can't call the police. And somebody just acknowledged the other day, they're like, and just so we know, there's still like horrific acts of violence that's still happening by the police, because it's so ingrained. It's not like they're like, oh, we're on blast, it's going to stop. So there's still, so folks in the community are organizing themselves, being, that's when the rioting and all of that, because I mean, the other thing that we haven't talked about is our city, our Minnesota was infiltrated largely, like other cities, by others that came in with an agenda to disrupt. So in addition to rallying and protesting, right, by local folks, there's a lot of the destruction that happened here was very intentional, particularly destruction to Black establishments and those safeguard spots that people really rely on. So I just want to be clear with, there was some random rioting by some white, there was a video of some white boys that were caught, like 4 white boys in a vehicle with no license plate, and they had them on the ground, and they were like, where are you guys from? And they're like, well, we're just from Wisconsin, and we just kind of came to Minnesota, but they basically came here to like disrupt. And then there's other advanced anarchy and other folks that, are setting kerosene lamps near people's homes and buildings and blowing up stuff. So I guess I'm just calling out, like, reclaim the block, and really that kind of education of what it means to actually have a neighborhood network. Prior to, some neighborhoods didn't even know like 3 neighbors on their block. They're like, a neighbor that I have to speak to. So, and it's not, again, this is not just city bound. So I'm calling out my city, but I'm also calling out those models that are happening nationwide, that we can say, okay, wow, folks are really showing up. Individuals, there's been so many individuals that have been just inspiring. I mean, artists that I work with, Tish Jones, Monkway and Dose, Signe Haraday, I mean, Felicia Perry, Kenna Cobman. I mean, the list goes on, Bayou and the artists that are painting, Leslie Barlow, Ryan Stopera, Trish, Herring. I mean, I could go on and on. Because
I'd love for them to tag them into @C210 so that we can see, we can hear what's going on, and we can stay in touch with what's happening in Minneapolis, most definitely. Lamar Mondisi Sangha, he had a question, or whether there's a comment. He said, no one is protesting outside the offices of the police unions who is supporting police brutality and contributing to political campaigns to support their agenda. We need to find out which politicians they are supporting. This is where the marchers or protesters should be at: police unions and the politicians that they are supporting.
I think, I can't speak for other cities, but I think that I have heard folks point out the police unions in the early stages. So I believe that folks are quite aware of the dismantling that needs to happen there as well. So I believe Andrea Jenkins, the vice president of the House of Representatives here, she has been really vocal about the different levels of political action that need to happen, and which offices need to be called out. She's our state representative, VP.
Excellent. Do you feel, or you and your city, do you feel the national and international significance of this moment, or is the fact that so much is happening in your city disables you from connecting to the international response? Because at the end of the day, when history is written, it would say the Minneapolis was the epicenter of this new era, especially if the new era is ushered in. But do you, at the moment, is it so close that you don't see it, or are you and the folks in Minneapolis connected to the international significance of this moment?
I absolutely. I mean, I speak for myself, but I think we're very inspired. I think that's part of why we still get up and do the work. I mean, when we see that we're not isolated, that it's internationally folks are rising up. And I think that's where we're reminded that one action has a reaction, right? And so we sort of see that ripple effect. Then we know that, okay, we're on the right path. So I've been personally inspired. I have lots of friends all over the world and lots of allies. And to have people reach out from the beginning, just like roll call, are you guys okay? Like, and this is what's happening over here too. And it wasn't even before that, there was an international sort of reach out around COVID. So I think what we're experiencing is new networks that are actually forming as a result of this. And that is a beautiful thing. When I rode down Lake Street, the other end of Lake Street, away from the 3rd precinct, just 2 days ago, and I saw this huge mural and this little girl, and it had her arms up wide, and she had wings on them, and then her dad was like right behind, like with her face, and it said, "My dad changed the world." And I was moved to like tears, because I think we're constantly reminded that it's not just city, it's not just here. There's a movement that has happened. And we would be ignorant to only sort of narrow in on what is here right in front of us.
I mean, it must have been the weekend after which is only like last Saturday. There was a death here in Toronto, which highlighted again the issue with police. I just say allegedly because that hasn't been proven, but the eyewitness reports say there was a woman named Regis Koczynski Packet. She was I'm not sure if I'm saying the name correctly, but she was dealing with some mental health and pushed off the balcony, or committed suicide. But the police were there present as the young lady fell out the balcony. So and then there was a massive protest that happened thereafter, and there's lots of protests that has happened in solidarity in Toronto as recent as last weekend, and even in the UK as well. The protests that have been happening consistently, and both of it is to express solidarity with our brothers and sisters in the United States, because there's been a definite highlight with regards to how African Americans have been consistently dealing with police, from the time where it wasn't believed to the time where it's clearly seen and it's clearly not been an adequate response. But it's also to highlight our own problems within the system and the police system, both in the UK and in Toronto, which has then spiraled into a real forensic look into systematic racism, because a lot of Black folks again in Canada and the UK and the States, have openly said, I can't come into work. After seeing what happened to George Floyd, I really can't come into work because that is a reflection of my own kith and kin. And I recognize that this is the same racist system that we're dealing with in various different parts of the world. So it was both a solidarity move and also recognition that our backyards are not that much better than what the folks experienced in the United States. And I think this is the fact that the United States stood up had just reverberated with communities around the world.
Thank you for saying that. And I think that's what we need to also teach our children, because otherwise it can really look like an isolated thing. But no, folks, there's a huge, and in fact, that's what we painted last weekend, solidarity banners. And so there's a bunch hanging around the city, and we're going to do it again. But I think that word is a powerful, powerful word that reminds us that we are not alone. And when we stand as a nation, as countries coming together, then we're even stronger. So yes, amen to that.
Yes, indeed. Well, listen, well, believe it or not, that was it's almost an hour on us, and I know when it's shown to IG, it was shut down. So we were trying to keep it within that hour. But it's been an absolute pleasure reconnecting and speaking with you, Sheikh Age. And like I said, this is the first of our series of conversation we're having this week, that it's unveiling and having a look at the system of racism as we've been experiencing it, and also what are the avenues that we can do to ensure our children, and like you say, our children's children, those that come thereafter, experience a much better world than we've experienced thus far.
That's it. And there's two lines from the poem that is one of I wrote it years ago, but it says, "We stand on the backs of those who've touched the bottom of the ocean's floor, ride on the wings of butterflies to face our reflections in the mirror and smile. At daybreak, we walk the path of the chosen ones. We are majesty, manifested in human form." And it goes on, but I think that would be my ending close message.
No, that's absolutely amazing. Like, if you've got a full poem, send it to me so we can put it up on our Instagram page. The CO Toronto know your talent.
So much love to you. This was just beautiful. I hope they know how amazing you are, because you're fire. So I hope you've been writing and stuff.
Oh well, listen, I'm gonna give you a call this week. I'm gonna relax for the rest of the evening, but I'm gonna give you a call this weekend just so we can catch up.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Bless you and your family.
You do love to the family as well. Okay. You take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.